All right, Saagar, what are you looking at?
Well, as you all know, when I'm confused, I turn to history to try and remind us of what our times might look like. It's never really a perfect replica, but can teach us always a lot. Only months after Biden was elected, there were Republicans calling him the next Jimmy Carter. And I actually even pushed back on that at the time. Inflation wasn't nearly at the highs that we see today. Gas was expensive, yes, but it wasn't astronomically expensive. Russia had not yet invaded a smaller nation in pursuit of its empire goals. And Biden, while incompetent from the beginning, had not as much time to prove it to all of us. But I am genuinely sad to say today, especially after reading Jonathan Alter's biography of Jimmy Carter, which came out last year, that Biden really is Jimmy Carter, except honestly, worse in many respects. Let's review just the circumstances. First and foremost is a fascinating history of Biden I did not know. In 1976, a spirited Democratic primary was underway to determine who would challenge Gerald Ford. The country was emerging from the wounds of Watergate. McGovern was a total disaster. Nobody knew which Democrat to turn to. The Washington establishment was pushing various senators and others, but a peanut farming first-term governor of Georgia named Jimmy Carter decided to run. Nobody supported him, except for one young senator who said they needed new leadership in the party. That senator was Joseph R. Biden, 33 years old at the time, and became the first sitting politician to endorse Carter by saying that since he wasn't old enough to be president, he would at least then endorse Carter himself. His blinding ambition and arrogance was evident even then, but what strikes me is how much Biden has become the heir to Jimmy Carter. Let's take a look at the conditions and their similarities, starting with the economy. Right now, the U.S. Consumer Sentiment Index is at the lowest point since they began measuring in the 1950s, coming in at 50.2. The last time that conditions were that low, you guessed it, 1979 and the early 1980s, right at the nadir of Jimmy Carter's presidency. Inflation is similar, with the highest prices today seen since 1979, exactly when Jimmy Carter was president. Crude oil experienced a similar supply shock under Jimmy Carter following the Iranian Revolution. Iran at the time was the second largest producer of oil in the world, and during the hostage crisis, we instituted an embargo, which caused massive pain at the pump here in the United States. It got so bad, gas lines and rationing happening. Our way of avoiding that today is just lift all controls and actually let the price high as goes possible. The theory being, if price gets high, enough people won't drive. What I'm struck, though, by is how similar both Biden are in terms of how they got elected and who got them there. Nobody really loved Jimmy Carter in 1976. Carter won the Democratic nomination by outlasting everyone else and by adeptly playing up his squeaky clean image in the wake of Watergate. He cobbled together enough votes to actually win the primary, but his core problem was that the same one that dogs Joe Biden. There was no core Carter constituency. Most people shrugged their shoulders and yeah, whatever, he's fine enough, I guess. Better than the other guys. He was a default choice more than an affirmative one. One where Democrats thought he was fine, but didn't really love him at all. Now, to the general electorate, he was the same. Carter was a choice to rebuke Gerald Ford and the failures of the Nixon administration, post-Watergate, far more than it was a choice of Jimmy Carter. He was the anti-choice, just as Biden was the anti-choice to Trump. Now, the problem politically for the two of them is that when you're the anti-choice and then you actually have to run things, then you're responsible and people actually get to get a good look at you. Carter ultimately fell to nearly a 20% approval rating as president. That's the all-time low. Right now, Biden is impressively running below where Carter was at that time of his presidency, but of course, he still has some time to catch up to him. The problem that dogged Carter and dogs Biden is the same. Nobody really liked him that much. Beyond the circumstances of even the political conditions, what really unites the two men is their inability to meet the moment and inspire creative thinking. Consider this. I read through the entire Jimmy Carter Crisis of Confidence speech, where he laid out his plan in 1979 to lower gas prices and to ease the pain of the American people. Here's what he came up with. Number one, the same reason that we had the problem in 1979 was that Americans had lost their way and they were consuming too much stuff. That's what he led with. He then announced a plan, and I'm not kidding you, to raise the price of oil so that people would use less of it. And at the same time, Carter raised prices at the pump. He extolled the virtues of, quote, alternative sources of energy, like, quote, gasohol and solar power. To bolster his ambitious plan, Carter proposed a windfall tax on oil companies. Now, your ears must be ringing, because all three of those things are what the Biden administration is trying to do today. It was rejected in 1979, and it should be rejected today because it's not actually a feasible plan for reasons that we've gone over here ad nauseum. And the reason I think Biden is worse than Carter is, look, To be fair, Carter was at least facing novel problems that had not been seen in his lifetime. That is not an excuse that Biden has, and he should have still have met the moment, certainly. But Biden is so old, he was actually a sitting U.S. senator and involved at the time of the '79 crisis. He probably watched that speech, and he has not updated policy since then. That's a failure that makes him worse. It's just one of the many tiny examples to show Biden's timidity to actually confront problems, to think differently. The thing about Carter is that just like with Biden, many events were out of his control. Joe Biden is not solely responsible for inflation. He is not solely responsible for gas prices, and he didn't force Putin to invade Russia. Just like Carter didn't force the Ayatollah to take over Iran, or force OPEC to boycott the US, or force Russia to invade Afghanistan. What made Carter a failure was his inability to react in kind to these crises by giving the American people a plan and confidence. Anything that he might actually do something about it, or at the very least try to do something for people's lives. After 18 months, we can confidently say we are worse off than the day that Joe Biden took office. And just like in 1979, waiting in the wings is a candidate that said, "Make America Great Again," who ended up winning one of the biggest landslides in American history. The inevitability of that outcome just seems more and more likely every day that passes. Isn't it just crazy how much history repeats itself?
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.